There's a listing that sums up this entire business better than anything I could write. 15 old watches, sold as a single lot, described by the seller as untested, unsearched, sitting in a box from somebody's junk drawer. The whole lot went for $11.87. 15 watches. Less than $12. Somewhere in that box, there was almost certainly one watch worth more than the other 14 combined, and the seller never knew, because untested, unsearched, is just an honest way of saying, I never bothered to look. That's not a coincidence. Nothing in that box became valuable the day it sold. It was always valuable. The value was lost the moment it passed from someone who didn't know what they held to someone who did, and that gap is where almost all the money in the vintage watch world lives. Here's the part nobody tells you. The watches that climb hardest are almost never the ones that looked expensive when new. They're the plain ones, the small ones, the ones with names nobody recognizes, because those are the watches nobody saved, nobody boxed up, nobody treated as precious. They got worn, they got scratched, and then they got dropped in a drawer next to dead batteries and spare keys. To you, that drawer is clutter. To a collector, it's a reference number, a caliber, an era, a dial, a set of details that decide whether you're holding a $12 cast-off or something that clears $10,000. The real question isn't whether junk drawer watches are worth money. It's why the valuable ones stay so cheap in the owner's hands, and who benefits from the fact that you can't tell them apart by looking. The answer is the same for both. Knowledge here sits in very few hands. It's rarely volunteered, and the whole resale economy is built on that imbalance. So here are the watches people overlook, by name and reference, and the ones that quietly clear 4 and 5 figures. One warning first, and it matters more than anything else. Do not polish it. Do not refinish the dial. Do not freshen it up before you sell. Authentic vintage pieces with original patina remain some of the best values in collecting, and a buffed case with rounded edges or a repainted dial destroys exactly what a serious buyer is paying for. The first is the Girard-Perregaux Gyromatic, and one dealer calls it the single most undervalued watch in the entire vintage market. Without exaggeration, Girard-Perregaux is genuine haute horlogerie, one of the oldest Swiss manufacturers still operating, with a pedigree that includes the legendary tourbillon with 3 gold bridges. The gyromatic name refers to their proprietary automatic winding system, genuinely innovative for its time, and these were built to a standard of finishing their current prices simply do not reflect, with clean dials, quality cases, and movements that are a pleasure to look at when the caseback comes off. The black gilt dials on certain references are particularly striking. These sit under $1,000 today. Flip it over, read the caliber, and leave it exactly as it is. The next one carries a name you've heard and a price you won't believe. The second is the Omega Seamaster DeVille, reference 166.020, described by specialists as the most undervalued vintage Omega you can buy. And alongside it sits something even better, a wartime Omega from 1944, running the caliber 30T2, one of the most respected movements Omega ever produced, in stainless steel, trading under $1,200. That is what old watches worth money actually looks like in practice, and it's currently undervalued relative to where comparable 30T2 references trade. 2 Omegas can sit side by side in the same drawer, one a common later piece worth a few hundred, the other a 30T2 with real horological weight, and nothing on the dial tells you which is which. The seller sees an old Omega. The buyer reads the caliber through the caseback and pays without negotiating. If that surprised you, the next is where the sleeper money genuinely lives. The third is the Universal Genève, and there are 2 ways in. There's the horizontal ellipse case with an integrated bracelet, powered by the manual caliber 42, produced from the late 60s through the late 70s. around 34 millimeters, running $850 to $1,400, and called a true sleeper by dealers who've watched them climb. And then there's the one with a story, an Italian railway-issued Universal Genève, signed by the railway authority itself. True traceable provenance, at one of the lowest price points you'll find, for a name with that caliber pedigree. An entry-level collectible with a story that punches far above its price. That railway signature on the dial is not a blemish or a repair, it's documentation, and documentation is exactly what turns an anonymous watch into a collectible one. Now the list shifts to the watches where the movement inside is worth more than the name outside. The fourth is the Lemania-powered tool watch. The Lemania 5100 is one of the great cult movements, and it powered NATO military chronographs, the Fortis cosmonaut issued to Russian cosmonauts, and assorted tool watch references across the 1970s and 1980s. Here's the insider move. Owning a watch on the 5100 in its own Lemania case is owning the story without paying the name premium. The same principle runs through the manual-wind Zenith El Primero, the caliber 420, which is rarer than the automatic version because fewer were made and fewer survived, and through the Omega Speedmaster Triple Calendar, a rarer and technically more complex sibling of the standard Speedmaster Professional that trades well below its relative scarcity because the standard model gets all the attention. Two watches, similar looks, wildly different calibers inside. Only the person who checks knows. The fifth lesson is the one that costs people the most, and it's the one thing that separates a score from a disaster: the franken watch. That single question, how to identify a parts watch, separates collectors who find incredible deals from those who get burned. A franken watch is a watch cobbled together from mismatched parts, a genuine case with a replaced dial, a swapped movement, an aftermarket bezel, and in the junk drawer tier, they are everywhere because the parts are cheap and the temptation is enormous, so you verify. Matching numbers between case, caseback, and movement. A dial whose printing, font, and aging match the era. Hands correct for the reference. Loom that's aged consistently across the dial, and hands, rather than one fresh replacement, glowing among 5 tired originals. And keep everything that came with it: the box, the papers, the original bracelet, the service records. Because in a market full of married parts, documentation is evidence, and evidence removes risk for the buyer, which is precisely what they pay extra for. The box gets tossed during a move because it's just a box. The papers get binned as clutter, and years later, the most value-additive things you could have kept are gone. The sixth takes that danger to its most expensive extreme, and it's the watch hiding inside the pile that's worth more than the pile. The vintage Rolex most likely to be misjudged isn't a Submariner, it's the small, plain, unglamorous one. The Oyster Date Precision Reference 6694 is a manual wind, 34mm Rolex with no rotor, so the case is incredibly slim, and while the market obsesses over automatic perpetual movements, the hand-wound 6694 sits well below the entry price of a standard vintage Datejust. People see manual wind and assume broken or lesser. Meanwhile, the Sea Dweller Reference 16600 is essentially a hyper-engineered Submariner with a clean, Cyclops-free profile, trading at a bizarre market inefficiency savvy buyers are exploiting right now. And the Explorer 2 1019, originally built for cave explorers and geologists who might lose track of day and night, has surviving examples with original dials and unpolished cases that are far less common than people assume. The danger is a fast estate clear-out where a dealer offers one round number for all the watches in the drawer. The good one gets absorbed into the lot. This is where the most people lose the most money, not because the watch looked like junk, but because it was disguised inside a transaction designed to prevent itemization. Grief and exhaustion are the picker's best friends. So the rule, plainly, never sell watches in a bulk lot. Never accept one price for all of them. Photograph every watch front and back. Read every reference. Research each one separately, because the entire value of a box can sit in one piece you didn't recognize. The seventh is the watch where the value comes not from the maker, but from what it did and who carried it. Military and institution-issued watches. The NATO chronographs. The Fortis cosmonaut issued to Russian cosmonauts. The railway-signed Universal Genève carry markings, issue numbers, and authority signatures that look like meaningless scratches or defects to anyone who doesn't read them. To the family, it's grandfather's beat-up old service watch. To a collector, those marks are the entire story, because they prove provenance, and provenance is one of the strongest value multipliers in this market, turning an anonymous piece into a documented one. The marks are not damaged to be cleaned away. They are the watch's identity papers, etched into the steel. And this is where I repeat the warning at its most emphatic, because issued watches are where well-meaning owners do the most catastrophic damage. They see a scratched, marked-up caseback, decide it should look respectable, have it polished and buffed smooth, and in doing so, erase the exact engravings that constitute most of the value. Evidence cleaned away is value destroyed forever. So those confusing marks are not the problem. They are the prize. We've covered makers, calibers, franken watches, bulk lots, and provenance, and the last three pull it together, starting with where the money actually sits. Here's a piece of hard market intelligence most people never hear. The sweet spot for value in 2026 sits between about £500 and £3,000. Below 500, the watch likely needs a service costing $200 to $400, which eats your entire margin. Above 5,000, you're competing with serious collectors who have already identified the bargains. That middle band is where mechanical quality meets market indifference, and it's exactly the tier junk drawer watches land in. It's also why condition matters more than people think, because a cheap watch that needs a full service isn't cheap at all. So, when you research, do not look at active listings, the watches for sale, with hopeful asking prices, because anyone can ask any number, and those are fiction. Look at sold listings, what watches actually changed hands for, and match the exact reference, caliber, and dial. Active listings tell you what sellers wish. Sold listings tell you the truth. And if you're spending real money on a vintage piece you haven't handled in person, under proper light, feeling the crown action and the case proportions, you're gambling, because no photograph replicates that. The ninth is the name that stayed while the company changed, and it runs through this entire market. Great makers died in the quartz crisis, got bought, got absorbed, or had their names sold off to companies with no connection to the original workshops. The name on the dial is not a reliable guide to anything anymore, and it cuts both ways. A familiar name on a late, cheapened, post-acquisition watch can be worth almost nothing, while an unfamiliar name from a maker's genuine golden era can be the prize. Tudor, Rolex's sibling brand, is genuinely undervalued for exactly this reason, sitting in the shadow of a bigger name while making watches of real quality. Vintage Vacheron Constantin remains surprisingly undervalued too, with references running an 18-karat gold case and a manual caliber derived from a Jaeger-LeCoultre base, quality that signals itself to anyone who knows the lineage, at $4,000 to $5,000. You judge by the maker in its real era, the caliber, and the originality. The things the people who know read fluently, while everyone else reads only the logo. The 10th is the grail, where every principle compounds and a junk drawer watch clears 10,000. The most extreme version of the central truth, that the value was lost the moment it passed from someone who knew to someone who didn't. At the top of this tier sit the watches that look like nothing, an early reference with an original unpolished case and a tropical or gilt dial, a triple calendar or complicated piece a normal person assumes is broken because they can't work out how to set it. A signed institutional watch with traceable provenance, a Submariner reference 1680, the first with a date, where original dials and bezels are rare and natural patina, adds value rather than subtracting it. A pre-moon Speedmaster from before the 1969 landing. These surface in ordinary drawers because their significance is invisible to the untrained eye. Every lesson converges here. Original dial and unpolished case, matching numbers, the caliber inside, the box and papers, the provenance, the warning never to polish or refinish, and the venue, because where you sell matters as much as what you sell. A rare vintage watch sold to a pawn shop or a general marketplace or a bulk estate buyer is sold to whoever walks by, while the person who will actually recognize and pay for it is a specialist dealer or an auction house that knows the reference is cold. So here's the checklist that flips you from the person being collected from to the person who knows. Don't polish it. Don't refinish the dial. Don't replace the bracelet. Leave every honest mark and faded patch where it is. Flip it over and read the reference, the caliber, and the serials, and check whether the numbers match, because the name on the front is only the beginning and the numbers are the truth. Keep everything, the box, the papers, the bracelet, the receipts. Never sell in a bulk lot. Never list anything as untested, unsearched, and research each piece on sold listings, not active ones. And when you've found something real, take it to a specialist, not a passerby. If you recognized even one of these, hit the like button and comment below if you've got an old watch in a drawer you can't identify, especially the plain and unglamorous ones, and I'd be happy to take a look. Subscribe if you want the part of the market the resellers already know and won't share. Because the truth under all of them is simple. These watches were never worthless. They were built to look like the ones people throw away. And the only thing standing between you and what they're really worth is knowing. That's not a coincidence either.